Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AI for All podcast. I'm Ryan Chacon. With me is my co-host, Neil Sahota, AI advisor to the UN and one of the founders of AI for Good. Neil, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Just trying to stay dry because a massive thunderstorm going on over here.
So today's episode, we have a lot of really interesting topics to talk about. We're going to talk about data integrity issues with AI. We're going to talk about how people can better navigate solution adoption, how to differentiate between what's real AI and kind of what's not. We'll talk about expectations for the year, lots of other exciting topics. And to do that, we have Heather Harris, the principal data scientist at Herkimer Consulting, a small AI and data science consulting firm. Heather, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Let's kick this off by having you do a quick introduction. Just tell us a little bit more about your background experience, kind of what you do in the consulting space as it relates to AI and all that kind of good stuff.
So I'm a psychometrician by trade, which is basically stats related to mental models and like testing world. A couple years into my career, I decided to pivot into data science and ended up working for a movie studio predicting the first film that was released since the pandemic had happened. So that was an interesting task because there was no precedence for it or way to really predict it. And since then, I've kind of grown my toolkit to be sort of a tech and stats/data science generalist. And I realized that there's a need for more technical folks to take a Sherpa approach of helping clients holistically through solving some of these tech needs, which now obviously includes AI and being able to do AI adoption in a good way.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's very much needed. There's a lot of conversations that we've had. I think even conversations we've had outside of this setting where people are just trying to understand not just what's happening in the space, but also how it's applicable to their business. How do they adopt? How they set themselves up for success? What's real? What's not? A lot of interesting things, and so I know we're going to talk about a bunch of those topics today. So if we start off with kind of the current state of the AI industry right now, one of the things that does come up often is when it comes to training AI, there potentially are data integrity issues, or how do you maintain data integrity? Like, what makes data more valuable? All those kinds of things. How do you kind of think about that, approach that? How do you kind of answer that kind of typical question from somebody when they talk about data integrity issues when it comes to the training of AI?
That's a great question. So there's a big gap right now between your typical kind of organization, especially in the nonprofit association type space, and the kind of layers of complexity that build up to using and training AI models. And I would say that there tends to be a lot of missing data, things that are grown organically over time, and even like structured data sets. So being able to use some of that information, there's a few layers of kind of cleanup that are needed before someone can actually use their data. And that includes what are kind of basic concepts like missing data and how you handle missing data that we don't have those layers built in a way where folks can just really easily kind of use tools to fix and like supplement their data so that they can grow up to the level of being able to train in-house some AI model so that it works a bit better for them. So I would say just your kind of typical things that have always mattered, first for stats, then for data science, and now more for AI adoption, still really matter. It's just trying to the issue of trying to get good resources and tools into the hands of users so that they can start kind of bridging that gap and adopting AI a bit more readily.
A lot of people have experienced the lack of data robustness, especially the clean structure of it. But Heather, you refer to the kind of the missing aspect. I think that's a challenge for some people that don't have all the information on the data they need, or they don't have enough of it to use AI. What's the solution there? Is it synthetic data?
So we've talked about synthetic data in the past. So synthetic data, meaning the ability to kind of supplement your data in a way where you're taking a best guess at what it would be if you had it, or imputing values. That's a great approach if you can do it in a way where you're basing it off of all of the possible information you have. There's a lot of even more advanced shops out there that I will say surprisingly are still using methods like mean imputation, which mean imputation is where you give everybody the average value. If they're missing a value, you put in the average for everybody. If you're missing, let's say, income, because those who are making the most money don't want to report their income, then putting the average in isn't just going to be wrong and a bad guess. It's going to bias everything that you train your models on to be wrong and inaccurate. So learning about how to best approach some of those challenges so that you have a solid base, especially if it's like demographically missing data based on like, specific populations of individuals, then it has bigger implications for lack of diversity and inclusion, things like that.
Well, it's a huge challenge. So, with synthetic data, or some people like to call it fake data, how do we actually create good synthetic data then? How do we make these educated guesses?
That's great question. So you can leverage AI approaches, and I'm going to say machine learning more in the sense of like simple random forest type models to impute the likely values and then use all those values to train your model. So it might seem a little bit like you're leveraging it twice, but it actually does when you run, like when we've done studies to see like, does the math check out and actually work better? It does work better if you use that approach.
So it's almost like a Monte Carlo simulation of data.
Yes. An informed Monte Carlo simulation of data, I would say. There's better approaches for how you can do it and make sure accuracy and things are there. So one of the things my wheelhouse is in now, and the realm I'm working in, is to try to help organizations build tools and approaches so that kind of they can go through programmatically and do some of these things so that they're in a better place. The biggest lift from my experience so far, nonprofit associations, those spaces are the ones that would leverage and have the best impact in efficiency from being able to use some of these AI tools, but they've got the biggest gulf to cross to get there.
How's kind of the evolution of quality assurance standards in AI data kind of coming along? Obviously, depending on how data is being used for, how important the use case is, the higher the quality assurance usually needs to be. So like the legal space, education, all these kinds of things, how are you seeing kind of those best practices unfold so that people can ensure that how they're handling, manipulating, with the data, it's as accurate and as kind of following those best practices as possible when it comes to quality assurance?
I would say so far I'm seeing a Grady approach, I like to call it, which is basically like just use the data you have in whatever shape because we want to use new tools. And the thing I'd like to encourage is that pause to say, let's actually evaluate what we have and where the gaps are so that we can take a better approach to it and have like a North Star of accuracy and what is the outcome that we're hoping to shoot for. Like, how does our data best serve that or not serve that? And how do we have to fix things if we need to collect more data, do imputations, things like that to actually get in a place where someone like an organization's AI ready?
Is it possible, because I'm trying to hear this question now from businesses, that we could actually collect too much data and actually have too much data available?
The data you need that's important should be prioritized. When it comes to like health data or like the continuous stream of data, you could capture a lot of erroneous data that you don't actually need for training a model. But being able to really focus in on what's important, and I think a little bit of soul searching on the front end to know your business, what you're actually attempting to do, I think that helps. And I wish in this space, and that's why I'm actually happy for this podcast and others that kind of dig in a little bit from that conceptual standpoint of let's talk about the concepts more than the like nuts and bolts of AI. I'm really grateful because I think it helps to put the emphasis in the right place. You could end up collecting a lot of erroneous data, building out a whole infrastructure to support that. And then at the end of the day, not being able to train a model or not knowing what you're doing still.
I won't name names. There are lots of companies out there that are collecting an absurd amount of data, and I think 90% of it, they just don't know what to even do with or it's even usable. And I think that's the key thing you're trying to share, Heather, is that what's the usable data and what's more importantly, the right data. So how do organizations figure that out? How do they know what's actually the right data?
I think AI strategy is really important. And I think starting with the business in mind, not looking to adopt AI for the sake of adopting AI and then trying to retrofit it to the business. I think it's really important to have that be like a known use case. There's so many new powerful tools that are coming out that we can leverage, but really businesses need to kind of go through the identity crisis of there's these, new tools coming out. How do we just implement them because they're sexy right now? And go back to like, where's the North Star? How do we actually know what we're doing? And then how do we use this in the best way? It could be that the tool that would be the best use case is the simplest one and just stats that were created, 1970s, 1960s. And if that's the case, that's awesome. And that's what should be done. It'll be a lot less expensive than trying to train an AI model. But I think kind of going through that thought process is really important.
I think that's actually really important, that just because we have a bright, shiny tool like AI doesn't mean that's actually the best solution. It's like healthcare, right? You don't need the latest, greatest medical device if there's a treatment that's tried and true for the last 80 years, right?
Let me ask you something I was kind of alluding to when we first kind of kicked off the conversation, which is about navigating solutions, the adoption of solutions. So AI has obviously grown in popularity over the last 12, 18 months, especially all the way from the consumer level to businesses now basically trying to understand how to bring AI into the business. What does it even mean to bring AI into the business? What solutions actually are AI? Which ones are not? Which ones are just kind of are the marketing team just throwing the word AI into their solution and promotional efforts to make it seem like they actually are an AI solution? How do you kind of advise companies, or what would be your kind of approach for companies to make better decisions when it comes to navigating the solutions that are on the market that they're considering bringing into their business, to understand, is this a company that is really providing an AI solution, or is this not, or is this more just, being very creative with marketing? And because I've seen this in all the industries, even outside of the enterprise world, even in the consumer space, companies saying they're using, it's an AI tool, an AI solution, or this product was made with AI, but most of it's kind of just to get headlines, when in reality, it's not really AI. So how do you approach that? How do you think about that? Because I think it's an important topic to talk about.
I think that's a great question. And I think it comes down to AI literacy from leadership in organizations and being able to be discerning with what's under the hood, so to speak, when it comes to what you're buying. There's a difference between using like staff tools or like efficiency tools. That's a lot of the rubber hits the road there for me, is what's the privacy? How are they going to use your data? Are you going to give them access, give access to the company or the tool to like some repository of code or documents and things that you're not meaning to share? So that's more of like a use case based look at privacy, look at how data is being used, things like that. When it comes to building something, like building a tool, let's say a nonprofit is interested in building a tool to help with intakes going more quickly and with the review process being streamlined, something like that. If that is the use case, then I would say you don't want a company to come in and sell you, oh, I can do this classification tool to your intake process, and it's AI, and it's only going to cost you $600,000, right? But at the end of the day, it's some sort of really basic stats or algorithm that doesn't do any more than what a data scientist could throw up in a day. Then they're selling you snake oil, and you're being kind of taken in that way. So I would say when it comes to a little bit bigger scale adoption, that's not that efficiency staff tool side of things, having someone who has a level of expertise come in and look under the hood and being able to know the difference between the time and resources it takes to do something like machine learning and some basic kind of stats approaches or algorithmic approaches versus large language models, larger like tuning, training kind of paradigms where that takes months and that does warrant a bigger budget. Having someone who can help navigate that's really important.
A lot of small businesses struggle on this front, that they either don't know who the right people are to contact for this help, or you worry about the cost. So is this an effective approach for them, those SMBs?
Maybe regret saying this later, but that's why I'm actually hoping that more consultants start working in the space that I'm working in, because there is a need for it. And that like trying to do that Sherpa approach of guiding folks through making some of these decisions, I think there's a need for it, because we're running through this like marathon of AI adoption quicker than we're ready for it with the AI literacy side of things. And I am very cautious of the snake oil salesmen, the people who are understanding that if you put AI on a tool that you've been selling for 15 years, but now it's, shiny again, we need to be cautious of that.
No, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I agree. That's what we're kind of seeing is they're just repackaging it with putting a couple letters there at the top to say, oh, this is actually an AI solution. I do think, your point about needing more people in this space, kind of in that quote unquote Sherpa role, I think is the more people you can have helping navigate these companies towards AI adoption success, the better it's going to be for not only the companies that are selling these solutions, but I think the industry as a whole, because you'll start to see more success stories. You'll hopefully start to weed out the companies that are kind of more of the snake oil salesman. And if once that happens, I think the market will start to correct itself where those that are really AI will rise to the top and the others will kind of fall off and fail, which hopefully will start to remove more of that concern that a company might have of getting in business with the wrong company, where then you have to kind of tell them when they start talking to you, it's like, oh, sorry, you kind of made a mistake and you've been spending all this money on something that's really not what it seems to be. How can companies, I guess, approach or assess what they really need before they kind of go into that process so they can hopefully better align themselves with a solution and a company that's providing it? Because I feel like that's a necessary first step before they even start looking for solutions, is to understand what is our actual internal need? What does that assessment look like? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And before we go into the adoption process, which might help them better not only navigate, but see success when it comes to adoption so that they are picking, the right organizations to work with.
The soul searching that I recommend upfront is consider who your audience or who your members, users, who your consumers are for your product, and be tech agnostic in your evaluation of what it is that you do for them. Because how you serve them might change and probably will change drastically in the next, 5 to 10 years. And what their engagement with your product looks like might also completely change in the next 5 to 10 years. But if you're in the business of, let's say from a nonprofit, or let's say EdTech, you're in the business of improving literacy in the US, right? Then that's the end game. And that's the thing that you want to build around. And you want to attempt to future-proof that if you can. And how AI supplements that is then going to be built into kind of supporting that end game, rather than figuring out a tool that you can pop in as the whole space is going to be changing in the next few years anyway.
I think we're not saying anything different from a business perspective, right? Focus on the problem, what's the opportunity, the outcomes, understand your customer and their needs, right? But why do so many organizations then want to put sort of the cart before the horse, and they're so worried about I don't know the capabilities of AI, I don't know how to use that. Why are they so focused there first then, rather than say, okay, this is ideally what I'd like to do. Now, what tools are out there to make that happen?
I think there's anxiety around it. And if I'm being totally a little vulnerable, I even have some anxiety around am I an imposter getting in this space? Because there's so much to learn and there's so much to stay on top of. The fact that there's such an anxiety around, we need to adapt this quickly or we're going to be left behind. Or maybe our competitors are going to adapt this quicker than us and then we'll be left behind. So there's so much anxiety around just getting something in place, rather than that stitch in time saves 9 of doing that front end work to try to make sure everything's in alignment. Because it's with that changing paradigm in the next, 5, 10 years, the tech is going to change. You're going to have to roll, you guys obviously, well, you guys too, but everybody, we're going to have to roll with the punches for what that looks like as it continuously changes quickly. And in most cases, a lot quicker than then we're going to be able to stay on top of it and kind of track changes and even anticipate changes.
I 100% agree. And I think it sounds it's more like a people problem or maybe a mindset problem, because we're living in an age of hyper change. We're probably going to experience 100 years worth of change in the next 10 years. The pace is so quick that they don't know how to react, I think, to that. And that's the problem, is that we're so used to reacting. Something happens, react, figure it out. And we're in an age now where you have to be very proactive. I mean, how do people make this shift? And how do they take advantage of your talents to make that shift?
I'm hopeful that the fact that we're on a little bit of an AI runaway train right now is going to help us give us some good perspective, in the sense that we really have to we have to prioritize and we have to figure out what it is that we're needing to do and be more intentional, rather than these cut edges and try to make sure we have as much of an edge or competitive kind of leaning as possible. And if we start running our own races, so to speak, as businesses, organizations, nonprofits, I think that's going to help with kind of having this more central core identity and mission. And I'm hopeful that really kind of the AI and how that builds around that is going to only be supportive. And it hopefully will have to be adopted as tools, because even the metrics for how well you're doing versus other companies, those will change with AI. They'll become more granular. It's going to be a more interesting space, being able to compare different businesses to one another. And even the consumer feedback loops, instead of someone getting 5-star ratings, having a plethora of data, including use cases where people's opinions get weighted differently based on how much they actually use products and engage with businesses. It's all going to be this kind of shifting landscape.
We're kind of learning as we go to some degree too, right? All of us are. But a lot of these business owners and companies, they don't, and we learned this in the IoT space, is as interested as they are in the solutions, they don't care as much about the technology at times as they do about the results and what's actually happening. So they need someone to kind of help take their mind off of those pieces of the process. So that's where I think there's, finding the right organizations and the right individuals to work with to help through the adoption process is critical for the success of that, especially early on in the industry. I know AI has been around forever, but thinking about, for us, how it's becoming more mainstream for companies to adopt and help navigate who's really selling AI and who's not. That's where I think there's going to be a lot of need early on until we start to see those successes actually really happen. So
I think one of the key things here is you always hear data. And I love how there's talk about you have to have the right data, the value add data. So, and, using AI capabilities once we know the outcomes we want to get. What's the other big challenges you see that businesses are kind of struggling with when they enter this whole space around AI or even just data analytics?
I think the understanding what's possible, fidelity of implementation kind of a thing, understanding what's possible given where your organization's at, who you have working, and the in-house expertise or who you can get as consultants, and the data and use cases. Being able to make a pragmatic decision about that is really difficult, even for folks who know what they're talking about. So I think the holistic view of where organizations are at, I think that's going to be a challenge. And that, again, that's why I'm hoping a lot more folks kind of come in this space to work to help with facilitating some of that.
Is it a challenge because businesses aren't good at self-reflection, or they don't even know where the mirror is?
I think we're all, everybody's got some blinders when it comes to self-reflection. And I think the ability to self-reflect on technical aspects of the business when keeping technical staff is a hard job to keep them on staff, pay them, keep them interested. So I think that confluence, it's either an opportunity or it's the confluence of things that could be really detrimental if a business is in a spot where none of those are working in their favor.
So let's, as we get towards the end here, let me ask some questions to kind of summarize some of the thoughts we've had. So if I'm listening to this, I'm a company looking to adopt AI. What advice do you have for that company looking to bring an AI solution to their business? What's the main piece of advice on how to approach that process? What they should be thinking about? How should they prepare themselves for that? So what would you say to a company out there that wants to kind of get started on their AI journey?
First and foremost, I would say from a leadership and strategy perspective, do some soul searching, really hone in on what your mission is and how your mission is a continuous mission through this next few, 5 to 10 years as the tech world is kind of shifting around all of us. And once you can kind of lock that in a little bit, then take stock and be self-reflective of what's the capacity from a staffing resource, technical expertise standpoint, and from data and sort of data integrity and availability standpoint. You don't necessarily need expertise in-house. You don't necessarily need the highest fidelity data if there's other data sets out there that can train basically for what you need it to do. You can borrow data or supplement in some ways. But I think being able to holistically take stock about those pieces and how they fit into an overall mission so that you can plan for flexibility going forward in how you would adopt AI, how it will supplement and support your business rather than a complete retooling of the business so that AI has a place. You want AI to be supportive, not the central tenet to your business. And I think if an organization kind of go through and organize their thoughts around that, that's a good starting point.
Where do you see things going kind of as we get further into 2024? 2023 was a big year for AI, just kind of, with ChatGPT and everything, right? This is what's kind of brought us to this conversation. So where do you see things going in 2024? What are the kind of things, not just are you most excited about, but like what are the predictions for how this evolves in the kind of business and enterprise adoption space?
I think for a lot of folks in the US and around the world, the development of AI is going to be almost covert seeming, where we don't see a lot of the big milestones. We just see it get integrated kind of passively in the background of apps and tools and things that we're using. I think from a business and strategy standpoint, I think we'll see smarter decision making, more informed, where like you're talking about a project management tool and it gives you information about the flow of projects and resources and stuff intuitively. But we need to also like kind of promote AI literacy at the same time. So we understand that all the information that we're being fed by AI isn't necessarily going to be accurate. We need to make sure we kick the tires and we know ourselves well enough that the AI doesn't know us better and we don't start trusting it more than trusting ourselves.
We talked about a lot of really good topics today. If I'm a company still unsure about the idea of bringing AI into my business, what would you tell them on the value and the benefits of really exploring this space, on utilizing AI to grow their business?
Learn about the different use cases out there and how it can accelerate some of the processes your business is already doing, especially when it comes to staff tools and sort of the efficiency tools that are out there. When it comes to changing business decisions or building it into bigger picture strategy, doing some like brainstorming around that, I think is excellent, because if you can think of a use case and AI can't do it right now, chances are in 5 to 10 years, it can probably do it. So just kind of having some ideas about how that might be integrated, I think is great, because we're going to see such flexibility in generative AI going forward, where it's going to be able to do so much more than what we can even, like the use cases we can even think of right now.
I think we covered all the main topics I wanted to cover today. I really appreciate you taking the time. For those out there, maybe want to learn more about what you're doing, reach out, follow up questions, thoughts, even kind of explore the opportunity to work together. What's the best way they can do that?
Reaching out on LinkedIn would be the best way.
Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm glad we finally got this on the calendar. This is, the journey that you're on in the role that you're playing in the industry, I think is something that people really need to understand and not overlook of the importance of it, especially in the early stages of an AI adoption journey. And AI is an industry, or more widely adopted industry that we're kind of getting into now. Because I think too many companies have a chance of coming across those companies or those solutions sold by companies that really are not doing AI. And if they don't know how to navigate those waters, how to prepare themselves for success in bringing an AI solution in, understanding what is it that they even really need to be adopting, it's only going to lead to potential kind of failures and disappointment with AI. And in the past, when we talked about the IoT space, we see that a lot. We see the percentage of pilots that make it successfully through the pilot stage is pretty low because of a lot of those reasons. I mean, there's choosing the wrong company to work with and understanding really how to navigate those waters on bringing a whole IoT solution into business. It's the same with AI. And I think the more advice and support you can have through that, the better you're going to kind of really be able to reap the benefits of what AI has to offer. And that's something I think people really need to really focus on.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and would love to have you back sometime in the future.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.